Hi, everybody. Good evening. Today we are here with our meeting with Professor Colbert and Anaí Fonseca. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Hello, everyone. So it's a rainy day in Brazil. Let's see what we have today. It's a great talk that Professor Corbett and I will be speaking to you about synchronicity and spirituality. So some concepts, but I wanted first to start with the synchronicity. So I was given by my good friends, Jussara and Marcia from the United States, a small book that it's called Thoughts by Joana de Angelis. So before I made a small meditation before the class, since we're going to talk about synchronicity, and opened the book by chance, okay? And this thought of Joanna was written, in our search for love, we are unlikely to find it in what appear to be the right people, places, or situations. We must find it within ourselves and then extend it to others. So I would like to, that you can stay with this sentence by Joana de Angelis, because we are not only learning concepts here. That's not the main goal of these meetings. It's self-discovery. And so our light teacher, Joana de Angelis, is giving, I wanted her to, to give a message. And this was the page that I opened the book. So it's all about learning the love within so we can extend it to others. So let's see what else we have. Oh, and this, Lionel, I was at Pacifica with you in Santa Barbara, California, Pacifica Graduate Institute, where Lionel Corbett teaches depth psychology. And after, it was the last time that I was in Pacifica some years ago. And then I think it was the meeting about the Red Book, okay, that you talked, and Sonu Shandasani and other great analysts from Pacifica. And I was already giving classes and studying Joana de Angelis and the Spiritist knowledge, the psychology. And so when I went down the hill, because Pacifica is up a hill, right? So when I went down the hill, I was wondering, I was very moved by, the images of the Red Book and Jung and all this stuff. But I was wondering, but how am I supposed to join, both the spiritist psychology of Joana de Angelis and everything that we were thinking about Jung and learning. And then I looked to the middle of the trees, and there was a deer, okay? And I had never seen, I had been with you there for that course that you gave about spirituality and psychotherapy and all. But I had never seen, and gone up and down the hill, I had never seen a deer. So I was thinking of Joanna and thinking how to join both, and what would be my role in all of this. And then I saw the deer, and it was looking straight at me. So I just brought to you the deer symbolism, and meanings include awareness of surroundings, intuition, speed, agility, grace, gentleness, devotion, and unconditional love. Deer are known all over the world because they live on every continent except Antarctica. So they are subjects in the mythology and folklore of many cultures. In fact, deer have important spiritual meanings for many. Seeing a deer is usually a good omen and means that your spirit guides are watching over you. So I didn't know all of this symbolism at the time. I went to look for it. But seeing the deer connected me. It was like Joanna was sending me a message that I would find my path. So I wanted to give you this example of a synchronistic event. I was very moved. I was very touched, and it was like a mystery. Remember, we were talking about the numinous with Professor Corbett last meeting. So it was very numinous, this moment. So I brought a little bit before of Jung about synchronicity before we listen to Professor Corbett. So Jung says, in my essay on the nature of the psyche, it's volume 8 of the collected works, I consider synchronicity as a psychically conditioned relativity of space and time. Rhine's experiments, the parapsychology, I think everybody knows Rhine's experiments in the 20th century with extra perceptions and stuff. So Rhine's experiments showed that in relation to the psyche, space and time are, so to speak, elastic and can apparently be reduced almost to vanishing point, as though they were dependent on psychic conditions and did not exist in themselves, but were only postulated by the conscious mind. Okay? So there is a relativity in synchronistic events of space and time. We're going to we'll understand better this point. So Jung goes on saying, the problem of synchronicity has puzzled me for a long time, ever since the middle 20s, when I was investigating the phenomena of the collective unconscious and kept on coming across connections which I simply could not explain as chance groupings or runs. What I found were coincidences, which were connected so meaningfully that their chance concurrence would represent a degree of improbability that would have to be expressed by astronomical figure. By way of example, I shall mention an incident from my own observation. We have talked about this case, Lionel, previously, but just to give in Jung's own words, okay? A young woman I was treating had at a critical moment a dream in which she was given a golden scarab. While she was telling me this dream, I sat with my back to the closed window. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, like a gentle tapping. I turned round and saw a flying insect knocking against the window pane from outside. I opened the window and caught the creature in the air as it flew in. It was the nearest analogy to a golden scarab that one finds in our latitudes. I don't know how to say this is scarabid, probably beetle. The common rose chaffer, that's the name in Latin. Cetonia aurata, probably, which, contrary to its usual habits, had evidently felt the urge to get into a dark room at this particular moment. The dream alone was enough to disturb ever so slightly the rationalistic attitude of my patient. But when the scarab came flying through the window, in actual fact, her natural being could burst through the armor of her animus possession, and the process of transformation could at last begin to move. Remember the knight in rusty armor that we saw, right? I thought it was interesting, Jung's words that with this synchronicity of the flying object when she was telling Jung about her dream with the scarab, then her natural being could burst through the armor of her animal's possessions. So she was possessed by her animals, okay? And very intellectual, probably very defensive. And then the process of transformation could at last begin to move. Any essential change of attitude signifies a psychic renewal, which is usually accompanied by symbols of rebirth in the patient's dreams and fantasies. The scarab is a classic example of a rebirth symbol. And then Jung talks about the ancient Egyptian book of What Is in the Netherworld, describes how the dead sun god changes himself at the 10th station into Capri, probably the scarab, and then at the 12th station mounts the barge which carries the rejuvenated sun god into the morning sky. So a very ancient myth, right? And Jung says meaningful coincidences, which are to be distinguished from meaningless chance groupings, therefore seem to rest on an archetypal foundation. I'm sure Lionel will explain better to us what Jung wanted to say here. I would like to call attention to a possible misunderstanding. I chose this term synchronicity because the simultaneous occurrence of two meaningful but not causally connected events seemed to me an essential criterion. I am therefore using the general concept of synchronicity in the special sense of a coincidence in time of two or more causally unrelated events which have the same or a similar meaning, in contrast to a synchronism, which simply means the simultaneous occurrence of two events. Because people usually say, oh, it's very synchronic, meaning in day-by-day synchronicity, but you see people that what Jung is calling attention. So the events happening at, simultaneously are linked by meaning, okay? And they are acausal. It's not a causal, they are not connected by causality, okay? So Jung says, I'm therefore using the general concept of synchronicity in the special sense of a coincidence in time of two or more causally unrelated events which have the same or a similar meaning, in contrast to synchronism, which simply means the simultaneous occurrence of two events. Synchronicity, therefore, means the simultaneous occurrence of a certain psychic state with one or more external events which appear as meaningful parallels to the momentary subjective state, and in certain cases, vice versa. For instance, in Jung's patient, the young lady, she was talking about the dream. Of course, there was a psychic state because she was talking about something very personal and probably numinous, because there was the scarab, and we have seen the scarab tapping on the window pane and then flying inside Jung's room, okay? And all the symbolism of rebirth. So at that point, something really powerful and emotional happens with meaning connecting the two events, but not because of causality, okay? So in An Archetypal Approach to Death, Dreams and Ghosts by Aniela Jaffe, an analyst very close to Jung, she states that the fact that synchronistic events are closely linked with the unconscious realm of the psyche, more specifically with the archetype, the transpersonal dimension of the psyche, explain their unpredictable nature. The contents of the unconscious operate autonomously. This fact is one of the most important discoveries made by analytical psychology in the last decades. The autonomy of the unconscious contents lends to all manifestations of the unconscious, including synchronistic phenomena, the character of the spontaneous, of the irregular. And she goes on saying that synchronistic phenomena should always be regarded as exceptional happenings, for the regularity of a manifestation is guaranteed only as long as the laws of space, time, and causality are valid. That is, in the psychological sphere of consciousness, or in a middle area of the physical, which encompasses neither the very big, the cosmic, nor the very small, the atomic, okay? In the domain of the unconscious, as well as in the borderline areas of the physical world, the validity of space, time, and causality is no longer absolute. The progress of events cannot be anticipated in either of these two domains, okay? So this is very, very important, because when we think that Joanna de Angelis says that the Jung self, capital S, is the spirit, we are talking about a dimension. When we're talking about the self, the spirit, we are talking about a dimension that is not ruled by space, time, and causality. Okay, this is very, very important. So in the domain of the unconscious, as well as in the borderline areas of the physical world, I would like Lionel to explain better what Aniela Jaffe wants to say about borderline areas of the physical world. The validity of space, time, and causality is no longer absolute, okay? And the progress of events cannot be anticipated. So the principle of synchronicity, Jaffe says, applies to all the pairs and groups of events which cannot be explained by causality, but which are experienced as related because they are bound by meaning. They are meaningful. It is extremely meaningful that an unreachable apparition of the dying person, for example, should be seen at the moment of his death, just as it is meaningful that a clock should stop, a glass shatter, or a closed door open when someone near us dies. I will quickly tell you that when my father died, I think around almost 30 years ago, okay, and more, 25 years ago or 30. So I was in another state, living in another state, and I didn't know he had an embolism. Okay, we knew later, only later. But I had talked to him that night, and my kids were really small, and I put them to bed, and I went to sleep. And suddenly, I cannot say, how long, because I'm, of course, I was sleeping, so I didn't have any time. And I was in Santa Catarina, the state above ours in Brazil. And it was warm, but it was like the end of the summer or something like that. And I was sleeping. It was everything okay. He was okay. He didn't have anything. And I had talked to him that night. So when suddenly I woke up, I don't know what time, and I was feeling really, really cold. I felt a cold inside. I felt cold inside for no reason, and I couldn't think because I was in that place between sleeping and waking, an altered state of consciousness. So I just, got some blankets and I put like 2 or 3 blankets over me. And then later, I cannot say how long, I had this phone call waking me up that he was in the emergency room of the hospital. And then afterwards, when when I was already in the hospital the other day, got a plane, all the stuff, and I realized he must have a flat line, at that time that I woke, feeling very cold, because more or less, I could more or less see the time in the middle of, early morning, late night. Um, so that would be a synchronicity. I was, for instance, that it's like the clock stopping or a glass shattering, or feeling in the body as if the soul has left, for instance. But I was not dying; he was dying. Okay, so it was something like that. It moved me a lot, but I didn't know at that point much about Jung, so I couldn't connect with that. So basically, signs like this have a symbolic meaning. They symbolize the event which they announce. At a man's death, we say that his time has run out, or that his last hour has struck. And as we put it, he has entered eternity, which is not measured by time. It can also happen that the encounter with a child or an animal, like my encounter with the deer, or that some visual perception of a landscape or a leaf of a tree represents one's own inner state in an astounding way, or perhaps recaptures a dream mirage. Such contemplative experiences of the identity of the inner and outer world usually cause a deep and sometimes lasting feeling of wonder or of release and enlightenment. Also, in these instances, meaningful arrangements of an archetypal reality are revealed. So Jung in Psychology and Alchemy says, the soul possesses by nature a religious function, and it is the prime task of all education of adults to convey the archetype of the God image or its emanations and effects to the conscious mind. But were it not a fact of experience that supreme values reside in the soul, psychology would not interest me in the least, for the soul would then be nothing but a miserable vapor. I know, however, from hundredfold experiences that it is nothing of the sort, but on the contrary, contains the equivalents of everything that has been formulated in dogma and a good deal more, which is just what enables it to be an eye destined to behold the light. This requires limitless range and unfathomable depth of vision. I have been accused of deifying the soul. Not I, but God himself has deified it. I did not attribute a religious function to the soul. I merely produced the facts which prove that the soul is naturaliter religiosa. I think it's Latin, right? So it's naturally religious, that is, possesses a religious function. I did not invent or insinuate this function. It produces itself of its own accord without being influenced by any opinions or suggestions of mine. I love Jung saying that. So ending here so we can listen to Professor Corbett. I brought to you some of the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec. And it's the chapters where the Spirit bring knowledge about natural law. So question 619, Allan Kardec asked the spirits. Oh, sorry. Asked the spirits. Has God given all human beings the means of knowing God's laws? And the spirits answer, while all may know it, they do not all understand it. Those who understand it best are righteous individuals and those who want to examine it. Everyone will understand them one day, as progress must be fulfilled. And they go on saying the justice of the multiple human incarnations is a consequence of this principle, since with each new existence, one's intelligence is more developed and the individual understands more clearly what is good and what is bad. If everything had to be fulfilled by each person in a single existence, what would be the fate of the millions of human beings who die every day in the atrocities of savagery or in the shadow of ignorance without having had the opportunity of obtaining enlightenment? So they ask us to see other questions here on the bottom to clarify better. And then question 621, where is God's law written? And the Spirit says, in the conscience. And they go on, since we carry God's law in our, this is Allan Kardec asking, since we carry God's law in our consciences, why does it need to be revealed to us? And they say, you have forgotten and misinterpreted it. God wants it to be recalled to your memories. And in question 622, has God entrusted the mission of revealing the divine or natural laws to some individuals? And they say, of course, throughout the course of time, there have been those who have received this mission in every age. They are higher spirits who have been incarnated for the purpose of advancing human progress. Okay, so now I'll stop sharing with you, and we can go, Lionel, I'll give back to you.
All right, thank you, Annie. So I'll just cover some of the points and some of the arguments and controversies in this area. For me, synchronicity is about the unitary nature of matter and spirit. Jung's idea, or psyche and matter, Jung's idea is that matter and spirit, which we experience as different things, both arise from some very deep level of unity. Jung calls that the unos mundos, or one world. And out of that non-dual level of unity, you get this emergence of what seems to be a psychological phenomenon and a physical phenomenon occurring at the same time. So for example, if you might dream of a plane crash, you wake up the next morning and you discover from the newspaper that there has been a plane crash. Well, obviously the dream didn't cause the crash and the crash didn't cause the dream. That's why Jung says these events are acausal. They don't cause each other, but one is psychological, the dream, and one is physical, the plane crash. But the link is meaning. The physical event and the psychological event have the same meaning. So this is an idea that skeptics will radically dislike, because they want to reduce everything to purely material causes. But that wouldn't account for the fact that these experiences have a psychological component. And so the big issue that arises is when these two events, one psychological and one physical, when they have the same meaning, where does the meaning come from? Some people think that when you have these two events, like the plane crash and the dream, that the subject, the experiencer, just gives the meaning to the event. We make up the meaning. Jung has a very controversial idea, which he says that the meaning is objective. The meaning is not just made up by the subject. It's given in the event itself. It exists. The meaning exists outside human beings, which is a very controversial idea. We don't just derive the meaning, that the person who experiences the event, the meaning is given by the objective psyche. It's not a human projection. And that's why Jung thinks that meaning at that level has an archetypal basis. It's not purely personal. There's some kind of unknown factor in nature which appears to us as meaning. And Jung actually thinks that meaning might be a fundamental category of the universe, like a natural law, something like gravity or something like that, that can't be reduced or explained. So this sort of transcendental or transpersonal meaning can manifest itself, which is coming from the archetype, can manifest itself either in the psyche, as some mental state like a dream, or in a physical event in the outer world. But the meaning expresses itself in these two different ways. It's objective meaning. Although we don't really know what meaning is in itself. And that's why Jung talks about transcendental meaning. Now, this is one of the areas of controversy. A lot of people really don't like that idea. They think that all meaning is a human construction. When you find two events meaningful, you've just constructed that meaning in a human mind. But Jung has a different idea. He thinks there's an archetype of meaning. So, for example, there's an archetype of the wise old man or the wise old woman, who sometimes appears in dreams, which is actually the archetype of spirit. And that archetype of spirit is present it's hidden in what seems to be chaos in life. There is this archetype of spirit or order hidden, and it manifests itself in these ways. And when you experience one of these synchronistic events, it has quite a powerful numinous effect. You realize that you're in touch with something much larger than the ego. These kind of big synchronistic events have what I would call a kind of a meant to be quality. There's something very special about them. And they don't tend to occur randomly. I've noticed that these synchronistic events tend to occur during periods of heightened emotional significance. They tend to occur around births and deaths, or when you're doing creative work, or sometimes in psychotherapy. Any situation where questions of meaning arise, then you tend to get these kind of synchronistic events. Another controversy that I would just mention, I think it's mistaken, but you may come across it. Jung talks about the psychological and the physical as meaningful coincidences. And so the skeptics will say, that just means that the two events just mean the same thing. They're sort of equivalent to each other. The skeptics don't like this notion of Jung, that the events are coming out of this unus mundus, out of this deep level of unity. One of Jung's critics says that when Jung talks like that, the critic calls it mystifying and sentimental waffle. But for those of us like me and Annie and a lot of other people, if you have a spiritual orientation to Jung's work, these kind of meaningful events are extremely important. Now, the other person who was very interested in this, apart from Jung, was Wolfgang Pauli. You remember that Wolfgang Pauli was an important quantum physicist. He was one of the original people involved in the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics in the first part of the 20th century. And I don't know if you know this history, but he and Jung had a very long correspondence, which is published. And they spent a great deal of time discussing synchronicity because they hoped that synchronicity might be a deep structure of nature that could possibly unify depth psychology and quantum mechanics. They thought that synchronicity might be the place where depth psychology and the deep structure of nature described by physics meet. So they wanted to develop a kind of a unified vision of reality, showing that at that deep level that matter and spirit are connected to each other. They weren't terribly successful in this endeavor, but there's an interesting literature on it. They thought there was some kind of third thing that's neither matter nor spirit, neither matter nor psyche, and these events arise out of that. That was what they were working on. And the connection is acausal. In other words, you have space, you have time, and you have causality. This causes that. But synchronistic events are deeper than that. They don't obey ordinary causal principles. So this is part of Jung's project of his teaching that matter, the material world, has meaning. He wanted to restore the idea that the material world is meaningful. It's not just dead and inert and lifeless. It has soul or spirit in it. He was afraid that the natural world, nature, had become despiritualized. Nowadays, people talk about the disenchantment of the world, but he used the word dispirited, dispiritualized, because of scientific rationalism, and he wanted us to get over that. And he thought that synchronistic events would restore the human sense of an underlying spiritual order that is deeper than ordinary causality. He called it acausal orderedness. Jung and Pauli were trying to discover this principle within nature, as if that whatever that principle is, it would explain, or it would include, quantum level phenomena and synchronistic events and psychological events, because they both felt that psychology needs more than just ordinary causality. Now, one of the confusing things here is that you'll remember them in the slide that Annie talked about an underlying archetype. And people misunderstand that as if Jung means that the archetype causes the synchronistic events. But that can't be true, because the whole idea of a synchronistic event is that they are acausal. So you have to fudge a little bit here. The way people deal with this is they say there's a connection to an underlying archetype, or the synchronistic event occurs in a situation in which there is an underlying archetypal pattern. So the archetype, I think of the archetype as a kind of link or bridge between matter and psyche. The archetype has a material pole acting in the physical world and a psychological and spiritual pole acting in the psyche and spiritually. And that's the link. But so what you see in a synchronistic event is an expression of an underlying archetypal pattern. But technically, you're not supposed to say that the archetype causes it. It's better to say that the physical event and the mental process are equivalent at the archetypal level. And what's happening is some kind of latent archetypal meaning has become visible. So we don't create this meaning, we realize that it's present. But this deep meaning is already latent in nature. It's not something we make up consciously. That's very important. It's a connection to the self, the divine self. So the best way to think about it is the archetype becomes manifest in a synchronistic event. And when he said, and you saw in Anna's slide, that the space-time barrier can be annulled, sort of dissolved or broken through, he's trying to talk about the fact that there are dimensions of the psyche that are outside of time and space as we know them. That's why you can have, for example, a prophetic dream where you dream about something that then happens later on. And actually nowadays in contemporary physics, they're talking about the fact that space-time is not fundamental, that space-time arises out of some deep level. Personally, I think it probably arises out of pure consciousness. But that's what Jung meant when he said that the space-time barrier can be annulled. There is this level of the psyche outside of time and space. You can't localize the psyche in time and space. Psyche and matter are rooted in this unos mundos, this unitary level of reality. And that's part of his picture of the world, that really reality is an undivided unity. It's really a non-dual point of view. We separate psyche and matter, or mind and matter, or matter and spirit, because we have to, because that's our limitation of our brain and sense organs. But that's only our limitation. At a deep level, matter and psyche are really the same thing. So there is this kind of potential world, and out of that, the empirical world arises. There's an underlying unity. And he talks about that a lot in volume 14. So for Jung, he's a monist. He thinks that psyche and matter, or mind and matter, are two different aspects of the same thing, two different sides of the same coin. They're not really separable. We only separate them conceptually in the ego, in our thinking, but really they're actually indivisible. Let's see, I don't know if there's anything else that would that be enough to get us having a conversation to get started? Any questions or comments?
Lionel, could you clarify to people that what you said in the beginning, that the meaning exists outside outside of us, the meaning?
Yeah, Jung calls it self-subsistent meaning. What he means is that it's transpersonal meaning. When you have a meaningful coincidence, like a plane crash, a dream of a plane crash and a plane crash, or something like that, the meaning that we experience is given to us objectively. It's part of nature. It's not just something that we project into the situation. That's why I said he thinks that meaning is a kind of natural principle. And that's very controversial, because a lot of people think meaning is just something you cook up in your own mind. But he says, no, it's given to you. There is archetypal meaning. Is that not clear? If he's right,
I think it is
a very important idea.
I'm trying to help people to connect with what the Spirit's book tells us. Okay, you see, when in the last PowerPoint, and when they say that we are evolving, right? Our consciousness are evolving, and that what they call God's laws, okay? Of course, Allan Kardec was asking the spirits in the 19th century. So it's the language and the knowledge that people had at that point. But I think it's Jung that says that the archetype are the footprints of God in the psyche, Lionel, or was that you?
He says the archetypes are tools of God or organs of
Tools.
in the psyche.
Okay.
God works
Tools.
using the archetype as instruments. I think
Okay.
that's the idea, which is really a beautiful idea, actually. It links psychology and spirituality immediately. I love that idea.
I
But
love
people,
this idea.
whenever I say it in a lecture, people get very excited about it in the wrong way. Because
No,
they
but
don't.
here,
Sorry. They want psychotherapy to be a secular pursuit. So they want to keep any kind of spirituality out of it. So they don't like this kind of conversation.
Yeah, but since we are talking,
Lionel.
I'm
sorry, Mark.
I just wanted to make a cheeky joke. You need some new friends, Lionel.
No, I have the right kind of friends. Anna is one of them.
I know, just more of them. The fact that they
And
don't
now
want
here
to
in the
hear.
group, we have more. We have
That's
more
what I'm
people
saying.
coming. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I was thinking, Lionel, about this connection, and I want everybody to think of that. And I know here, Jusara, for instance, knows a lot about the Spirit's book, and a lot of people, Sylvia also reads a lot. So I wanted us to think, because, for instance, when we were reading, and I cited Psychology of Gratitude by Joanna de Angelis, one of the things that we understand that, and also Anne Sinclair, I think, is here too. But what Joanna de Angelis talks about, to be able to be grateful and give this recognition, and it is like let's say, if I can, I'm trying to join everything together, but it would be like, because love in the sense is creation, okay? It's the capacity of create and the manifestation of all this creative energy, let's say, that comes from the source, and that we are emanation of this source, like in your graphic of the ocean and the waves, okay? And it will express it through us, each one of us in a certain specific way, but it comes from deep within, from this transpersonal dimension of the psyche. So when okay, the synchronistic events, they appear when something surfaces, right? Thinking of your the ocean, your graphic that we were talking about, and each one of us as a wave. So, and thinking of what Allan Kardec says, that God's law are written in man's conscious, for instance.
Yeah,
Okay,
the archetype would be God's law. It's the same idea, really.
yeah, that's what I wanted. Yeah, that's what I wanted you to. I thought about the archetypes, if we can.
They are. That's why Jung says they are organs of God or tools of God. It's the same idea. Just expressed in a different way.
So knowing ourselves, this self-knowledge, let's go back to the first slide where I opened Joanna de Angelis, and she was talking to us about finding love within ourselves and then expanding it to outside. So, and also, Lionel, that a synchronistic event, as you were telling, usually happens when there is an crisis, let's say, because of birth or death, or something that really, it's very emotional in a way, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this looking inside of us, this self-knowledge, searching for the spirit, if we could say, inside of us, would be a way of walking this path that Joanna Jones is saying, finding love, finding this creative energy within ourselves, so that we can express and be like in a same vibration and with others. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but I wanted to expand in this a little bit, and I saw that Anne has her hands raised. Hi, Anne. So let's hear what she has to say, then I think Lionel can put everything together for us.
Oh, I don't know if I can do that.
Oh, you can.
I just wanted to, I wanted to bring an element that was I was wondering about while I was listening to all this, because we are talking about things very based on the individual, if you like, and the universe, but I think also about the relationships that we have with our friends in the spiritual world from a spiritual point of view, that there is a constant, let's say, if you want to call them guides or teachers or spirits that overlook, who are, let's say, have a parental position and are helping us through our incarnation. And when we look for guidance, the guidance can come as synchronicity. Things can pop up, so we can find meaning in that. So I particularly don't follow this, but let's say a person sees a feather and they believe in angels, and they said an angel, and they give it meaning. But it could be that the spirits are bringing something that is significant to that moment, to help that person make me come to the meaning, or find something useful from there as a building block in their pathway, perhaps. So I was wondering what people think about that.
I think that's right. I think synchronistic events are guides. They are pointers.
Mm-hmm.
And they do come from the other side, as it were. If you're doing creative work, I'm just astonished by the synchronicities that occur. For example, when I write, it's just amazing how synchronistic events occur. And they're clearly guides and signposts.
Yeah.
But Lionel, as I understood, Anne is asking if, for instance, deceased relative that is in the spiritual realms, and of course, if a person is not a medium, for instance, that can see the spirit or this, could the spirit, see if I'm right, Anne, about your question, could the spirit help synchronistic events to happen? Would that be your question?
Can I just add, because, for example, we know that, let's say if I walk down the street, there are a million things happening. There are a million things to see, but where my attention goes, I just see those things. It's a famous thing of those videos where the gorilla passes the back and you don't see the gorilla because you're not focusing on. So life is like that. So when it's kind of like you're directed, or you're looking for that synchronicity, for that meaning. So amongst all the things that are available, that kind of comes into your focus, so that you say, aha, yes, that's a message. That's telling me to follow this path, or this is good, or this is bad, or this is meaningful, or whatever meaning we give it.
A good example of that is when you go into a library and a book falls on your head.
Indeed, yes.
Twice.
Oh, gosh.
So it's the same idea that you're describing, isn't it? It's a message, but it's a spirit-matter interaction, you see. The spirit causes the physical book to fall.
Yeah.
Or the feather to appear, whatever it is. Yeah. And that's a deep mystery, what that connection is between spirit and matter. It's like when you read the tarot or throw the I Ching, you have a psychological state and then you end up with a physical process, and there's some kind of spirit-matter interaction. And we call that synchronicity. It's the same thing. All forms of divination, I should probably mention this, all forms of divination are based on synchronicity.
Thank you.
I think Mark wants to make a question. Mark, yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Excellent. And yeah, I guess two comments or offerings, and then also a question. I mean, one was, just an offering of, on the topic of, we use this word love, and I guess in my understandings and traditions, I make a distinction between the very shifting core emotion of human love as opposed to non-physical or spirit unconditional love. So, DeAngelis is talking about love, but I mean, it's a little bit like they say with, indigenous populations in North America, they have 50 different names for snowflake. And in a similar way, I mean, I think we in the West would benefit from coming up with some distinction related to love. And I guess one that I'm offering here is unconditional love versus love. And I say that, wonderful comments and observations and sharings, Lionel. I really appreciated your point about how synchronicity comes forward in your experience and research in heightened emotional significance moments. And for me, that ties into, that really profound subjectivity of what emotions are. And I was wondering, this is where it's kind of a question, is that you talked about this lovely paradox for many others. That's why I made my joke about having some additional friends that somehow matter and spirit, that they want it to be separate, whereas kind of in this community of sorts, we are trying to see where these overlapping. And I was just wondering, what your view is of the concept of personal faith being kind of an in-between space between matter and spirit. In other words, in the same way that emotions are this incredibly subjective space for individuals, I'm wondering the degree to which that personal faith, is perhaps a spanning between that which is physical and objective and that which is non-physical and spirit. And I just wonder if you had any comment about faith being an intersection point, perhaps personal faith specifically, not religious faith, by the way.
Well, what kind of faith are you talking about?
Well, the word psyche is used. I mean, right? I mean, the derivation of psyche, it doesn't get used a lot in the times that we live in. But ultimately, the derivation is soul. And I have soul as, at least for myself, that which is residing within me that animates the organic. And when I pass this incarnation, then that's what's leaving. So in other words, faith of the intersection between in myself, personal faith between me as matter, I'm matter and I'm physical, yet I'm also non-physical and spirit showing up as a soul. So that's what I mean by personal faith, as opposed to religious faith, which my understanding and my tradition was created to reflect the realities of who, that duality within self, that we're both and, it's not either or. So that's what I mean by personal faith, as opposed to inherited cultural religious faith.
That's a kind of knowing, isn't it? If you know that you are both spiritual and material, it's a knowing. I don't know. Is that what you mean by faith?
Yeah, that's what I think. That's something that I work with quite a bit, which is different than, for me, belief.
Oh, belief is worthless. Belief, because it can change in an instant. Something happens and your belief changes, but that's not very helpful. But there's a kind of spiritual intuition or spiritual knowing, which is perhaps what you mean by faith, I think.
Yeah, or personal faith in particular. But yeah, knowing personal faith, I see both of those as, so that's a lovely clarification.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So I think Sylvia.
You're muted.
Your microphone.
Just thank you very much. It's been extremely interesting, this lecture so far. I was just thinking in terms of this connection of matter and the material world, something that you said, that matter, material world has meaning. To me, it seemed that beyond space-time, this reality beyond space-time, I feel it's almost like the connection of the material world and the spiritual world, both sort of integrating and going like that. Because I think something that Anne was saying, that maybe with the help of spirits, we come to the conclusion of that synchronicity that happened there. We sort of see it. So I think this is very interesting, because we are arriving almost to a point of understanding the spiritual world and the material world as a connection between the two, because we know in the spiritual world that there is no space-time. Time is not ruled by that. Or maybe there is a rule. Of course, there is a rule in the universe which rules there as well, but we don't have the knowledge at the moment. And just another thing as well, that you said, Lionel, about that is life, matter. And I don't know if it can be applied, but in Spiritism we learn that there is the vital principle which gives life to matter. Organic matter, anyway. And we know that within rocks and everything, I was reading something the other day about some geologists said there's some kind of life in rocks as well. So it's a way, maybe like everything in the universe is developing. So we do have life in matter, because we, the spirits teach us that the vital principle gives life to matter, and that's what makes us alive, that the spirit separate from that but is unified and can only actually express itself when it's connected to this living matter that's given. So I think that it's a point that I understand, maybe right or wrongly, I don't know. And also something that Mark was talking about, love. I think we are creatures of love. We're being created by love, the love of God that unifies all of us. And we are capable of an incredible love. We don't know it yet, I think, in many ways, because, we have pride and selfishness and all sorts of things that maybe covers this potential. But I think can be seen in motherhood, that sometimes a mother goes to extreme sacrifices for their children. And I think one day all of this will be able to express, each and every one of us, this love, because the point that Joanna says, you create love within yourself first. You have it within yourself, and then you spread out. And I was just thinking about that passage in the Bible, that in the gospel, that said, the more you give, the more you have, and those who don't give anything never gets even less. And it always seems so paradox, that thing, that, you give and you have more, you have a lot, and you get more, and those who don't give anything don't get anything. And this is because the more we give, the more we give love and sympathy and understanding. I think those are the two things that we start with until we get to that love that we have within. We can offer people empathy, understanding, caring, and then eventually it will be this love that's within us already, when we take all the layers, that because we are united in love, by the love of God that unites all of the beings, and until we understand this. But I see the synchronicity, it's almost like the understand that the two, the spiritual world and the material world, are coming together in our understanding. I'm sorry if I talk too much, but just want to say that.
No, thank you, Sylvia. I think it's great. Lana, would you like to comment?
When Joanna says that you have to find the love within you first before you give it to others or something like that, she may not be taking into account people who have never been loved So they have no capacity for love. So even if that love is in them somewhere, it's completely inaccessible. That maxim of hers would not be helpful. They can't reach it because it has to be evoked by the experience of love. If you've grown up in a family where you're not loved, where you're hated, you may never in your life be able to love other people because that capacity has never been stimulated in you. I'm speaking as a therapist, really. It's very easy to say things like find the love inside you, but it's in many people, it's completely buried and inaccessible.
I know now a lot of people want to talk, but I just want to make a small comment that she usually, her books, she points out when even Lionel, the person should go to a psychotherapist, for instance.
Yeah.
Because joining everything together, what Mark was saying about unconditional love, that is this kind of love that creates, right? And since we are emanations, if we could say, of the source, as Silvia was saying, of God, of the, we call God, but whatever the person has his, her own concept of the transcendent one, the unity, let's say the light, however you want to picture it, or you feel it. But in a non-dual, Lionel, point of view, the love would be there. It's only that this wave that you are in this incarnation, right? In your scheme of the ocean, each one of us being a wave, hasn't had, first, the opportunity, as you said, of knowing how to be loved or to be loved, and so nobody can share or teach something that cannot find, it didn't have the experience, previously, okay? But then we would be talking about this personality. And what Joanna points out is not simply looking in a way like look to yourself, your inner self, and find love there. No, it's a process, and that's because maybe Kai wants to talk about her experience with people of different past lives. It's a process. So the tools of God, the archetypes, as Jung says, are there for us, and they will manifest, as you said in another of our meetings. There will be particular archetypes that will manifest itself in this life, for instance, of this personality that we are living. But it doesn't mean that we haven't had many other lives and with different experiences. So what Joanna is saying is it's a very deep search, let's say, because in our inner, deep inside, in our unconscious, we have many, many experiences. Maybe in this life, we haven't had the experience of being loved. But, what is this life compared to how many others that we have had? So if we meditate, if we have a spiritual, path, we will certainly find this potential and this knowledge within ourselves. I don't know if I explain, but what she wants, and she has the techniques, we are going to see in the end of this course, some of her techniques that she suggests, to go further and to go beyond our limitations, our personal unconscious. And of course, she's always saying, oh, when this and this happened, then the person should, for instance, look for a psychotherapist and analysis and things like that. So the person can overcome, this shadow or whatever, and go and keep going. But let's see, who raised the hand before? I don't know if Sylvia, Richard, and Indalva, Roderick. I didn't see, maybe Richard and Indalva first. Go ahead, I think.
Oh, hello. Thank you. I just wanted to share with you. I'm actually finding a little bit difficult to understand this topic tonight, but the fact that there is love, it's why you're talking about love. I just wanted to share with you an experience I had today, which sort of it was so meaningful to me. I went somewhere where there was someone like someone passed away. Here in Sheffield, in England, it's very common that people are sharing stuff instead of putting it in the bin or throwing it away. So we went to see. I needed a certain item, and these people advertised that they were giving things away. And me and my husband, we went over, and as I arrived there and I was looking around at the things, the items they had, I noticed that most of the things were on the second floor. And I looked at the couple who were there, and they were like middle age. And I thought at that moment, oh my goodness, these two people are going to have to carry all the things that people won't take. They will have to take it downstairs so that they can be moved. And so I went to the lady and I asked her, would you like me to help you to move some of this stuff downstairs? And she said, oh, yes, please. It's much appreciated. And so I started helping her to move the stuff downstairs, to keep it on the ground floor. And then as we chose what we wanted to bring home, we just have a small car, and my husband would have to put it on the top of the car to carry it home. But then two people, there was another lady there, and she was waiting for someone else. And then all of a sudden, a man turns up with a big van, and his van was empty. And so I don't know how, but my feeling was at that moment that there were those two totally strange people, in that we were all strangers to each other there. But then I had this couple who were there with a big van. They just out of nowhere, like offered us to help us to bring. It was like a double sofa and a chair. They literally decided to say to us, we'll take this home for you. And at that moment, I could just think about my action that was of giving, as Sylvia has just mentioned, and Joanna also is talking about love within ourselves, because when we find love within ourselves, we want to share it with others, and we look at each other and we see each other's each other in whatever is going on in our lives. Like I observed that couple, I saw them there. I wasn't just there just to pick up whatever I wanted and walk away like a lot of people. I noticed them. I realized their situation there. And so I am until now, like, I just cannot believe that two people who we'd met right there had like offered to bring our items to our house without us asking. And they were just, I called them angels, because I just thought this is something that doesn't happen to us every day. And until now, I am still like so happy that we can find people around us. And I am sort of also thinking that it was my action because I wanted to give as well rather than just take, that has also created that second, that reaction from those people who were there to sort of say, no, I will do this for you. And it's like, it's just, I think this is an expression of love from a totally unknown place. And I think Joanna, when she's talking about us finding love within ourselves, and I think it is possible, like Dr. Colbert has said, we can find love even when we come out of difficulties and that we haven't been shown love. Because if we look, it is everywhere, and we can learn with the situations as well around us. I know it's not as easy when as when we have received at home from our parents and from people who are our carers, but it is all around us as well. I think we need to be open to see these situations and understand that the love of God is always there, and and when we are ready to give, there is so much more for us to receive. And I think this is my message here that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much. Beautiful testimony. Thank you. Sylvia, I think we have 5 more minutes.
Very quickly, very briefly. I just want, going to what Lionel said, and I can understand that, but I was thinking about what it says in the Spirit's book, that within each one of us, there is this love that's great within us. And even though sometimes we are unable to transmit it to other people, because either we have not learned how to love or we didn't have an experience of being loved, but sometimes we love animals. We put our loves into objects or things. We create, maybe we have a collection of comics or something that we adore, So in a way, the love is there, is misplaced or unrealized. But and I do accept it, what they say, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, when the Spirit teaches us that the love is there, maybe it's sort of deviated. But also, I came to think, unless someone is like really a psychopath or something that has no feeling at all, like a part of that feeling so buried within them that they can be quite cruel. So I wasn't quite sure about that, something that needs to learn or something. But I just want to make the point that within, with the teachings of the Spirit, that just the love is there and into different things before we learn to love other people and ourselves. That's all, sorry.
Thank you. Lionel, would you like to comment?
No, I think saying it's there is an act of faith, because sometimes you can't see it. I mean, what would you do in a concentration camp? Where's the love? It wouldn't be visible. It may be there, but it's really just an act of faith to say it's there somewhere, it's buried or something.
Yes, but
I'm
one thing, sorry, Lionel, in that book about the concentration camp, that they made the movie, when they actually talk about the stories of each person, there were people there, there wasn't love, but they could divide a little piece of bread.
Yeah.
So there wasn't everywhere, but there were individuals within that group. And even Viktor Frankl talk about that, in his book. So there is always love. It's just that we need to see where it is. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine.
We have a challenge.
Well, I just didn't want to be naive about it, that's all.
Just briefly, if I can.
1 minute, Mark.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll do it in 20 seconds. I just make the offer of that a given, in my understanding and tradition, a given incarnation may not be about love. There are individuals that die at age 5 or 10 or 20 with a very different journey. So I find accepting all of these various paths and having boundaries as a very important path and growth. So thank you. Thank you for this evening. This has been great.
Thank you. Would you like to say some last words, Lionel?
No. Why don't you wrap up?
Okay. Kai, would you like to say something? No? It's okay?
Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah, I think we carry the baggage, right, from before and other lives. And yes, even though love is not accessible, and we see that very often, in many cases, the memory from before may influence also. It's not just our experience when we are, in the belly where we are born, or we are like raised by certain families and traditions and cultures, but we bring a memory that become more and more possible to access with time. And therapy and maybe hypnotherapy or other ways through synchronicity. And then that's when we have this experience that are not possible by the cultural and parents' influence. So that's how I think, about the love or every other thing, the access that we might have, but we don't know yet sometimes. So,
Thank
that's
you,
why
Kai.
I need to do the work.
I would just make a quick point so that in 2 weeks' time, when we meet again, we can discuss further. I was giving class in Portuguese now for my class of Joana de Angelis, and she was talking about forgiveness. And all this, I was wondering, this talk about love, where is love, and that we can live a life without love because we have, for instance, have parents good enough to give us love, because of course they haven't learned yet, or things like that. But then Joana says, because we usually overlook the fact when she talks, remember the self is the spirit. We don't think deeply about that. I was thinking, it reminded me, Kai, when you talked about that. And then I was reading with my students that when Joana talks about forgiveness, she said, look at the compassion of God, the transcendent one, that give us the opportunity to forget when we come to this life, because we don't know what we have been doing previously, right? And she said, if we were able to remember, how would we feel? And not only us, but people that are incarnated with us, for instance, it's like a wave would be, the interconnections. For instance, I can have as my let's say, as my husband, for instance, somebody, or no, my husband of the children, for instance, as a son of mine, someone who has done something bad for me. Or I can be the daughter of someone who has done, something bad, or even killed me in a previous life. But in this life is having the opportunity to give me life, even if it's not able to love me as a parent should love me. But it's just being given the opportunity to give me life so that we can forgive ourselves, for instance. So the interconnections, and imagine if everybody would remember what have been doing, and who is my son, who is my daughter, who is my husband, who is my wife, who is my brother or sister, we wouldn't be able at this point of evolution, maybe, to express the love that we are having the opportunity to learn in this life. So I think it was great the way that she, I will translate this paragraph to you next meeting. It's wonderful the way that she said, look at the love of the Absolute One for each one of us that gives us this opportunity. And I hadn't thought about, well, I have thought about that, but not in the same way as Joanna was telling us. So even if we don't realize that the love is there, this faith that Mark was talking about with Lionel, that Lionel said, the spiritual knowing, we should understand that this is a way of connecting to and accepting Mark, that love is there, even if we cannot, grasp it yet. If we are on the path of learning it, if we think we haven't been loved enough, if we find ourselves in a concentration camp, for instance, but then we have a Viktor Frankl who has had the same experience and found a way to express the love. So I just wanted to make this point because the Spiritist knowledge brings us this wonderful concept that is also a psychological concept that Sky and Sylvia and other people work with, of reincarnation and of the compassion of the Transcendent One, to help us, be there here in this moment and forget things that would be much harder for us to live this life. So if we realize or not, love is with us because we are here, and we have forgotten, at least for this experience, what made me come daughter or son, or be born in this or that country, and have experience of suffering, for instance. But if I just realize that this experience that I have, this opportunity of life, is love in action. That's why Joanna says there has a whole book of psychology of gratitude. So being grateful for this life doesn't matter how awful it looks at certain moments of life, but just remember that we are having the opportunity to be here without remembering all the awful or things that probably we have done at some point, whatever, of our evolution. So this is love in action. I just wanted to make this point because this is not naive. This is really hard for our souls to grasp and to really express the gratitude, because we keep thinking, oh, I'm feeling bad today for this and that. I don't know if you realize, but I was a little slow because I have a labyrinth problem today because I had a bad cold and it affected my labyrinth. So I was kind of dizzy sometimes here. I don't know if, but I have Joanna looking to me here, and I asked for help to be able to be here with you. So why? Because I understand that it doesn't matter what happens. They are with us. And in Lionel's, wonderful image of the ocean, we are all connected to this source. Doesn't matter if we realize or not. So just have this hope, or not hope actually, this really have the will, the power to connect with this love, as Lindalva said. Then it will express itself in life, and then probably we will, go to the next step of evolution together. Just wanted to make this point. Sorry for, and then I'll leave you. Thank you so much. We had a lot of people here today, Lionel. And then we'll see each other in 2 weeks' time.
On the 7th.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.